Alright, so hello guys and welcome, and today we are gonna be doing a tier list of decks in Pauper which are the most suitable for new players. I do know there are a lot of new players watching right now, so we are going to do a tier list of the most popular decks. We consider the price, how good the deck is, and how much it teaches you, how much you learn from it, and how difficult would it be to pilot for a new player. So I really hope this will be helpful for you new players that want to get into Pauper, and see you in the video. Alright, so first on the tier list here is Rakdos Madness. So Rakdos Madness is a burn deck, it's very aggressive, and the only thing it's trying to do is to reduce the opponent's health to 0 using very cheap creatures that discard synergies and all the different burn spells. It's quite different from the mono red burn version, and that is because it actually has the ability to gain a lot of life in the process, which means it's pretty good against very aggressive decks while being a very aggressive deck itself. So this deck is pretty awesome. If we look at the price, you can get Mono Red Madness for around $20 to $30 it seems, because there are multiple versions. Of course, if you are playing the version with artifacts, that one is much more expensive because the artifact lands are just more expensive. But if you're looking for the version with no artifacts, which I by the way think is a little bit better because it's not very susceptible to hate, to artifact hate to be precise, I think that one is better and it's also much cheaper. There are really no real expensive cards here. The most expensive card is like $1.5 to $2. It's like Lightning Bolt. And the rest of the cards are just bulk for a couple of cents, which is awesome. And this deck is, by the way, very good. So the price, it's very cheap. The difficulty of playing it, it's a burn deck. You will get familiar with the Madness mechanic, which is a very good mechanic to be familiar with, especially in this format right now, in this meta game. And it's very strong. It's one of the most played decks. It has very good matchups into most decks because you can simply just kill them. So because of that, I think I will give Rakdos Madness the S tier as your first deck if you are a player who wants to play Magic. The second on the list is Mono Red Synthesizer, this here. Now this is very similar to Rakdos Madness, but it usually doesn't discard cards to gain the card advantage. It uses some artifacts, it uses very cheap and very efficient beaters in the early game, and it's a little bit more expensive than Rakdos Madness. It doesn't have the life gain, but of course it has just one color, which means the lands are going to the battlefield untapped, which means it's much faster than the Rakdos Madness in some scenarios, but the Rakdos Madness has some stabilizing forces in there as far as life gain goes, right? So this deck is very simple. In that case, it's very suitable for new players. You will learn some cool mechanics with it. You will learn how to work with artifacts. You will learn how impulse draws work with cards like Rens Resolve or Reckless Impulse. And you will learn how to beat your opponent in the face. Although this deck is around $60 to $100 depending on the version and the sideboard choices, because for example the artifact lands can be a little bit expensive. For example the Great Furnace, you can get it around $3 to $6 depending on where are you buying it from, so that bumps up the price a little bit. But I would say as far as the deck team goes, if you are willing to spend a little bit more, it's a cool deck to start with. It's a burn deck, it's very simple to play, right? You will learn the basics very quickly and you will beat your opponents very quickly. So just because of the price, I can't really have this in the same tier as Rakdos Madness, but I think it's like B plus or A minus. I think we will give this the A tier as far as your starting deck goes. That's a pretty good place for it, I think. It's the bottom of A tier right now. Next up on the list we have Giant Wildfire. So Giant Wildfire is a very long-lasting deck, meaning it grinds your opponent. You have to be expecting very long games when playing Giant Wildfire. The deck isn't super expensive, it's a little bit more expensive than Madness and a little bit less than the Red Synthesizer. It's around $45 to $70 depending on the cards you choose, where are you buying it, and the sideboard choices. But the game plan is very long lasting. Again, it's a grinded deck. So if you are someone who doesn't like the aggression that those two decks provide, I think Giant Wildfire could be a really good entry. I personally think Giant Wildfire is one of the best decks in the formats. It's really hard to hate, and it has a lot of hate cards in the main board by itself. For example, like Nihilist Spellbomb, there are not many decks who can fit the hate of Graveyard in their main deck, but Giant Wildfire can do that, and that's pretty awesome for that. So that's definitely some bonus points for the deck. As far as how difficult is it to play, it's not too bad. Of course, because the games go longer, you will have to make I guess many more decisions. And you know, the cyber choices are very different since it's a 3-color deck. The mana base isn't too expensive, you are playing some artifacts lands, but most of them are bridges, which are not very expensive, and then you are playing Bolt of Whispers, which are kinda expensive, like $2.50, but that's not too bad, right? The deck is really strong, and basically if you are not a fan of the aggressive decks, I would put this into the A tier. It's not the easiest to play if you're a beginner, you can make some mistakes because the games go so long, but the archetype is so powerful that I think if you learn it, and even if it's your first deck, you will be very successful very quickly, so Giant Wildfire is an A tier for me. Next up, we have Mono Blue Fairies on the tier list. And this is a deck that has only one color, that's blue, and the theme is fairies and ninjas. It's a tempo deck. It's a little bit different from both of those archetypes. It's not super aggressive, although it has very low mana curve, so the plays you'll be making will be in the early game most of the time. And it's a tempo deck, meaning that you want to have a tempo, drawing many cards, drawing many more cards than your opponent, and dealing damage to them before they can react, and then you control the battlefield with counter spells. So, and spell starter sprites, which is basically a walking counter spell. It's a fairy, right? So this deck is decently cheap. It's in price, it's similar to Giant Wildfire, again, depending on the choices you make, but you know, the sideboard and everything is pretty unified since you play just one color, and I will tell you, this deck will actually make you learn a lot, since there are so many decisions you actually have to make with fairies, because the deck seems really simple on the surface, but then when you look deep within it, you know, you have to make your decisions where to hold mana for the counter spells and where you can play your creatures. Those are the plays that win or lose games. The games with this deck will be relatively quick, and since you are playing blue, meaning you're playing the counter spells, this means that you have chance against most decks. Of course, you will run into some bad matchups. We will get into those matchups in a bit, but I think if this would be your first deck, you would learn a lot from it. Yes, the price can be a little bit higher than, for example, Rakdos Madness, but I still think as a learning experience and as a really strong deck in the format right now, it's one of the best. The mana base is really consistent, the price isn't so bad, and you'll just learn. I will give this S tier. I think I would put it below Rakdos Madness, but fairies are amazing to learn, so yeah, you definitely can pick this up as your first deck, especially if you like tempo decks, and you don't like, you know, burning your opponent or playing really long games with Giant Wildfire. Next up on the tier list is the Affinity deck. We have the Grixis Affinity here. So this deck is actually very comparable to Giant Wildfire, but I think it actually has some negatives. So it's much easier for you to get hated out because the artifact hate is actually very relevant against you and not so much against Giant Wildfire. Games with Affinity, with Grixis Affinity last usually quite a long time. Again, similar to Giant Wildfire, it's a very grindy deck. The price, it's probably the most expensive deck because of the artifact lands. I think you will buy this for around $100, I would say, maybe a little bit less depending on your choices and where are you buying this from, but the decisions you have to make this deck are sometimes a little bit difficult, but it's not too bad. I don't think it's one of the harder decks. I would even say it's similar to Giant Wildfire as far as difficulty goes, but I'm not even sure if it's as good as Giant Wildfire. See, you are playing a card called Mirror Enforcer, which imagine it's a 0 mana 4/4, and it's crazy to say, but it might be just good enough in this meta game. And the Writing Chrysalis, which you have to pay full 4 mana for in Giant Wildfire, is, I guess, better. It has fallen out of the meta a little bit, but it's definitely still like on the top. It's one of the better decks, I would say, maybe even one of the best ones. It's definitely a top 5 of the format, I would still say. And the deck is powerful, but I think you can get a little bit better of a bang for your buck if you're a starting player, and I don't think you have to spend $100 or more on a deck, because there are just some better options. So yeah, you can go for it and you won't regret it if you won't spend like $100 for a deck, but I think there are some better options. I simply would go for a John Wildfire if I was a newer player, so I would actually put Affinity in a C tier. One more negative about Affinity is actually that the cards, they are hard to get sometimes, because a lot of people play this deck. The artifact lands are very sought after, so you might actually have trouble to get all the cards, like the Shamans for example. Those are pretty hard to get. So yeah, this is a C tier. It's like B- or C+, but you know, it's not bad. It's a great deck, but for me this is a C+. And actually, after thinking about it a little bit, although I do agree with everything I've said, let's give it a B-. It's a worse B tier, still expensive, not a great bang for the buck, but B- is the place for Grixis Affinity. So next up, we got the elves, and the elves are really specific. A lot of people don't like playing against this deck, because if you don't have the right answers, you automatically lose. The price of this deck is actually pretty low. It's about like $30 to $50. It's actually very similar to Rakdos Madness. You can get it for relatively cheap. But the problem with this deck is the difficulty. It's really hard to explain to a new player, and I still sometimes have trouble playing this deck, because, you know, you are tapping your creatures a lot, you're using your creatures, you need to play them in the right order and tap them in the right order, use their activated abilities in the right order to actually make the most out of this deck. So if you decide to go for elves as your first deck, I think you would make a good decision, although you need to expect a little bit of a higher skill ceiling than maybe the previous decks. The price is good, but the difficulty is really high. And they are good. They actually don't have a great matchup against a lot of those decks, especially like John Wildfire and Affinity, because of the Shamans again, which just destroy them. But this deck stomps some people. Like, if you're not ready for elves, you will just get trampled over and the elves just win. So simply because of the difficulty of this deck and the very high skill ceiling, I will go with a C tier. It's really difficult to play for a new player. But the price is good and they are very powerful. So, you know, this could be a very big challenge for a new player, but if they decide to go through and follow through on that challenge, this deck could be good for them. Next up on the tier list is Mono Red Burn, but the Madness version. This is actually a very recent deck. It plays similarly to Rakdos Madness, but it doesn't play black, so there is no stabilizing force. It plays the Gutter Snipe, which is a powerhouse, and it plays a lot of spells that are simply free, like Fire Blast or Lava Dart, meaning you can sacrifice lands instead of paying the mana cost, and it uses that with the Gutter Snipe and cards like the Flame Breather to kill the opponent very, very quickly. If you are not ready for this deck, it will completely burn you. It's so fast, so efficient, and it draws so many cards. I don't think the price is very high. Actually, the sideboard is pretty expensive because you need to play the Pyroblasts, but the rest of the deck is so cheap. Like, genuinely, if you're just looking at the main deck, this deck is really cheap, it's really powerful. It's not very hard to play, you just need some basic mechanics to understand. You will learn some things about this deck, you will learn how to play at instant speed, how the Madness mechanic works, right? It's a monocolored deck, so no decisions to make with the mana base. It's a pretty good deck for new players. I'm not sure if your friends will like you, because it's really powerful, like really, really strong. And if your opponent doesn't have the life gain to sustain it, man, you're just gonna burn them down. I have to give this deck the S tier. It's easy to play, it's cheap, and it's incredibly strong, so it checks all the 3 marks basically for a really good deck for a new player. So yeah, I will give this the S tier. Next up we have Mono Blue Terror. And it's similar to fairies in some sense for new players, but it also is not. So it requires a lot of decisions, and what I actually mean by that is that you will need to wait. You can't just play cards with mono blue tempo. It's the terror deck, right, with the snakes. And you will counterspell a lot, you will cantrip a lot, you will try to set up your snakes a lot. The deck isn't super difficult to play, but it teaches a new player how to play at instant speed and how to be patient, which is pretty important. The deck is decently cheap, although it's like $60 to $80, again depending on some choices and the vendor, but it's powerful nonetheless, and you will learn a lot. Although the price is not negligible, right? Like if we take like $20 to $25, or maybe like around 30 to 50 or 60, like that's almost like double the price, because some of the blue cards can be a little bit expensive. They are like $1.5 to $3 usually. So you know, if you play full 4 copies, which you probably will, it stacks up a little bit. I would say it's still a decent deck for a new player to start with. It's not the best one. Is it in the same category as Chant Wildfire and Mono Red Synthesizer? Well, actually maybe. It's better than Affinity. Well, it has to be, because Affinity is so expensive. We will give this like A-. It's between A and B. It teaches you a lot. It's a good deck. You know, since you have the counter spells, you can beat most decks if you play well, and if you're a little bit lucky. So yeah, this is definitely a solid choice. Next up on the list we have White Weenie. This is a very simple deck which will familiarize you with playing some more aggressive archetypes, playing for a board state and then buffing up your team and killing the opponent, which is pretty nice. The deck is relatively cheap. You can get it for around $45, sometimes even more. It really depends, because for example a card named Prismatic Strands is played in the deck, and that card is like $4 to $5, but the rest of the deck is cheap. It's like all the cards are less than the dollar. One of them is like $1.50, right? So you know, it's a pretty good deck, and very cheap. The sideboard can be really expensive depending on what you're going for, because some play Dust to Dust, that's like a $9 card, so you know, there are a lot of ranges depending on what you do with this deck. But some decks don't play that, and they can go relatively cheap. Of course, all of the decks play the Prismatic Strands, but Dust to Dust, you don't really have to play that now, since Affinity is not super popular, so this deck is relatively easy to play. I think it teaches you a bit about the board states, and not just like burning your opponent down. The games can be relatively fast, but not always. You sometimes have to wait with White Weenie and win even the grindier matchups. The price is good, the difficulty is good, and the deck is pretty good as well. So I think with White Weenie, I would actually recommend it a little bit more than Mono Blue Terror. Is it S tier? I don't think so, because some of the cards are still a little bit expensive. And if it was cheaper, I would say it's S tier. But for me now, it's like the best A tier deck. It's like, I would recommend it more than Mono Red Synthesizer, because Mono Red Synthesizer, it's I think still a little bit more expensive. But yeah, White Weenie in A+, that seems like the sweet spot for them. Next up on the list we have High Tide. So High Tide goes into D. Reason for that, it's relatively expensive. It plays Merchant Scroll, which is like a $14 card. The deck is incredibly difficult to play for a new player. I actually don't think it's possible to play for a new player, because it requires a very high game knowledge and decision making. You need to know how exactly the combo works. If you don't, you can't even play the deck, right? And I can't really imagine a new player playing this deck. And also, the combo phase of this deck takes so much time. It's so long, not only for you but for your opponent as well, and maybe sometimes it resolves into nothing because the combo doesn't really go off. So it's pricey. It's okay, it's good. Okay, I will give it that, it's good, but it's so difficult to play for a new player. I can't give this better than D. If there was like an E or F, I would probably put it there, because I feel like it's not fair for the elves to be in C and then just one tier lower is High Tide. Yeah. Let's just give it a D and move on. If you're a new player, please stay away from High Tide. Next up on the list we have Celestia Boggles. Now Celestia Boggles is quite a cheap deck, you can get it for $40 to like $75, again depending on some choices. The gameplay is very linear, basically you build one huge monster that cannot be targeted by the removal of your enemy, and you beat the opponent down. You're playing some auras, some enchantments for it. It's pretty good. You don't have many ways to draw cards, but your opponent has not got many ways to remove your Boggle, so it's a fair deal. This is a pretty good deck for starters, simply because of how simple it is to play. You still have to make some decisions, especially when your opponents use some sideboard cards to actually get rid of your Boggle or your one big monster that you want to win the game with. So there is still something you will learn, but for the most part it's pretty simple. The deck is very easy, it's relatively cheap, and it actually works. When we look at the website I was talking about before, it says that it's like more on the bottom, let's say, but this can surprise people because, trust me or not, some decks don't even have a card to answer your monster, so your monster is just going to beat them down and there is not much they can do about it. So because of that, I will actually give Boggles, I think it's an S tier deck for starters. Like, it's so simple, it's relatively cheap, it teaches you the game, the basics, right? The decision making isn't too crazy, but you still learn a little something. I think my 9-year-old brother could play this and he would beat me, maybe, yeah. So I will give this an S tier, and as far as wear, I think it's even a little bit better than Fairies. Let's put it like here. It's a very good deck for starters, definitely an S tier. Yeah guys, we could do one more tier, but I think we will just stick to the 5. I think it's enough for the decks we have here. Okay, next up we have two decks which are very similar. It's Gruul Ramp and Gruul Ponza. So there are some differences between them. This is a mid-range / very aggressive deck, depending I guess how you draw, but it's very streamlined, meaning you do one thing, you ramp into your big creatures and kill your opponent that way. There can be some interaction, but it's not super relevant. The normal Gruul Ramp version without the Ponza package, which means you destroy your opponent's lands with the Ponza package, by the way, that's what the Ponza is. This Gruul Ramp, it's not only cheap, it's actually pretty good. It's not the best in this meta game, but you still see it now and then. And it's a powerhouse if you're not prepared for it. There are simply times where you know you lost the game on turn 2, when they go turn 2 Writing Crystalist, that's the guy on the photo here. And you know, you're surprised, you can do much, and you just simply die. And that's what the Gruul Ramp deck can do to you. It's cheap, it's efficient, it's simple, it will teach you some things. There are cards like Nyxborn Hydra or the Krushok, the Bannerhide Krushok, that will actually teach you some activated abilities and how Bestow works, which are two mechanics that aren't very usual. You will learn how to tap and tap with Arbor Elf, how to make the mana combo. You have some sideboard decisions to make as well, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, I think this deck is pretty much perfect for beginners. I will put it between Boggles and Madness. Actually, I think it's like this: Madness third, Boggles second, Gruul Ramp first, and then I think the Mono Red Madness is actually third. It's right above Rakdos Madness. It's a little bit easier. On the other hand, the Ponza package is a little bit more expensive because the Ponza package is costly. It costs like $4 to $5. I think like the Thermokarst is a little bit more expensive, which means the deck is a little bit more expensive. It costs like $20 more. So I can't put it into the S tier, and people hate Ponza. So if you have any friends, I don't think they will play with you very much after playing Ponza. People are just, it's like they just don't like it if you destroy their lands, okay? It's like if you discard the cards they have in their hand, they don't like that. So with Ponza is the same. I don't think it's S, simply because of the price difference and the gameplay difference, but it's still not bad, right? Like, it's still not bad. I think I will put it on the bottom of the A tier. I would rather recommend Mono Blue Terror, but I think I would recommend it more than Affinity at this point of time. Next up we have the Defender combo, or Waltz combo as some know it, very similar to Elves, right? It's not a creature beatdown deck, it's a combo deck. The price is pretty much the same, or at least similar. The play patterns are also very similar. The decision making is a little bit different, but it's in the same bucket, right? Like, if you know how to play elves, you probably can handle the walls. And if you have no idea how to play elves, then you probably have no idea how to play walls. I bet there are some exceptions, but that's how I think about the decks. Very similar mana base, the green core with the tap untap guys, the elves, the Jaspera Sentinels, you know the drill. It's a C tier, not very expensive, but very skill intensive, and I guess hard to grasp for a new player. So next up we are going for the Altertron, and in general we could put a Flickertron in this category as well. All the Tron decks that go for some sort of combo, some infinite loop and whatnot. So those decks are usually a little bit more expensive because they play like a lot of single cards or 2 copies of certain card, which can be a little bit expensive. For example, the Altertron, you can get that for about $70 to $110, again depending on the vendor. It's kind of difficult to grasp the combo decks at the beginning. It's definitely not as difficult as High Tide. You can kind of get it. It's a little bit like walls, is that you're setuping, you're drawing your cards, and then you have a certain phase in the game where you are able to go off and kill the opponent that way. And if you learn that, you actually can be good at the deck very early on in your MTG career, right? But that being said, it's a little bit too expensive, even more so than the walls we are comparing it with, and a little bit hard to grasp, I would say. There is a lot of play at instant speed in the Tron decks, especially Flickertron. Like, Flickertron would be D, but Altertron, I think that it's a little bit easier, and that's the one we are ranking. I will give it the bottom of the C tier. I would rather recommend walls or the elves to a new player than the difficult to play Tron decks with the combo packages. Okay, next up we have spy decks. We will do 5 or 6 land spy, of course depending on the version. This deck is relatively cheap, it's around 40 bucks, like 35 to maybe like 60, again depending on different factors. It's a combo deck again, so it cannot be too high. I guess the combo is a little bit difficult to grasp. Number one, the timing of when you can play the spy. Number two, what will you do when you play the spy, like Songs of the Damned, and then reanimating the Dreadscape zombies, and then playing the Dread Return, and then, like, that's pretty easy in and of itself. It might not be for a new player though, and especially the setup, like, you need to get your lands from the deck. It also isn't very good at teaching the game because there aren't many decks like this, right? Like, you have 5 or 6 land decks. No, you really don't, right? Like, 1 land or 5 to 6 land spy is the only deck that operates like 5 to 6 land spy, because it's the only deck that does the thing. So yeah, there is a lot of setup. You need to track a lot of things, like how many lands have you played, and then the decision making of the timing is there. It's not super expensive, so that's fine, but the play patterns can be pretty difficult for a new player. So this is actually right here with the Altertron in the C tier. Next up we have Mono Black Sacrifice. Now there are a lot of variations. There is the combo one with Bloodthorn Vampire and Rite of Consumption, and there is the grindier one, right, that doesn't play the combo. I think this deck is pretty decent for new players. It actually teaches you a lot, especially about your triggers and the activated abilities, right? I think the gameplay would feel very satisfying to a new player. You draw your cards, you have a lot of things to do in the early game. You can track your Mortician Beetles and how many counters they get, right? You can remove your opponent's creatures with Accursed Marauder. You draw a lot of cards, then you play against Mono Red, you add the Silvok Lifestaff to actually gain some life and maybe beat them that way. You play only one color, so your mana base is just swamps, which is clean for a new player. The deck is also quite cheap. You can get this like $30 to $60 again. Depends, of course, but this is a pretty good deck. I will say it's probably a little bit more difficult than some other decks, It doesn't teach you as much as fairies, but it's also easier than fairies. I think me having fairies at S tier might be a little bit biased. I think the deck is a little bit difficult to play for a new player, but it teaches a ton, so I gave it some leeway, and I think I will do the same with Mono Black Sacrifice. It's a great deck for new players. It's very simple, it's streamlined, it teaches you a lot, it's cheap. I think you couldn't really want more. You also learn to interact with your opponents. I think this is like a lower S tier for me, definitely. Next up on the list we have the Ores of Blade deck, and I think in the same space we could rank things like Boro Synthesizer, basically the decks that bounce your artifacts with Core Skyfisher and Glynhawks. So those decks are usually a little bit more expensive because they play the artifact package. The artifact lands are a little bit more expensive again. So, you know, this will cost you like, what, $50 to $90 probably, again depending on some things here and there. The play patterns are pretty clear, although you are interacting with your opponent a lot. It's not super difficult to play, but I don't think it's also the best. I think, for example, Mono Black Sacrifice and all the decks in the S tier are right now probably better than Ores of Blade into most matchups. So not only it's not the best, it's also pretty expensive. And how difficult it is? Well, it's like B to A tier difficulty, I would say. It's not that difficult, but if Affinity is in the B tier, I think the Ores of Blade needs to be in the B tier as well. Boro Synthesizer could be a little bit higher because the deck is more aggressive and actually has more pace. But I think B tier, I would maybe recommend it a little bit more than Affinity, simply because of the price difference. There is still like a $40 price difference between those two decks, right? Next on the list we have Dredge. So I don't know why the rats are in the image. This deck doesn't play the Crypt Rats, but that's okay. Dredge is very interesting. Again, it's similar to Spy, but also not really, because you are not playing a combo deck, you are actually playing your cards, and then eventually something happens, right? As you are doing your game plan and playing your cards. This deck is actually pretty streamlined. It's sort of a combo deck, but it doesn't play like it, if you know what I mean. The price is around $40 to $75. There are some expensive cards like Stinkweed Imp, which is like $2, the Exhume, which is like $6, which is really expensive for a new deck. I'm only a little bit biased because my friend, who is relatively new to Pauper, has this deck and he's been having a blast with it. Simply because it's streamlined, like you want to do the thing of returning the Lotla Giant, and if you do it, it makes you so happy, right? You have a lot of life gain with Notre Bone. Some of the cards can be a little bit more difficult to get, I guess, but I still think the deck is pretty sweet. But yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. The Exhumes, right, $6 per piece, that's not very pleasant for a new player if they're getting into Pauper, I guess. I'm thinking top of the B tier. It's much easier to play than all of the C tier decks, like much easier. It's similar in a skill level to these decks, I would say. It's a little bit cheaper, and it's actually pretty good, especially in those household games when you are playing on the kitchen table and you guys don't have sideboards. So without sideboards, this deck absolutely slaps, right? There's still some decision making to make, and you need to learn how Dredge works, of course. You know, your graveyard is your second hand in a lot of cases, so that's something the new player has to learn. So this deck actually teaches a lot. It can be a little bit difficult, but not too overwhelming, I would say. So I will give this a B tier. It's like same as Affinity for me. Yeah, I was thinking between B and C, but I still think those decks are much more difficult than Dredge, like Ultratron and Spy, yeah. I will stick to B, but it's like a bottom of a B, I definitely can see that. So next up on the menu we have Infect. So, Infect, okay, let's start with the price, because that is the most interesting one. There are many different versions of Infect. It can be really cheap, you can pay like $30 for that, or you play Lotus Petal and then suddenly just those 4 cards will cost you 40 more bucks, which is pretty crazy actually. Actually, not even like $40. Lotus Petal is even more expensive, so like the price can bump up over $100 pretty easily. I do have an Infect with Lotus Petals, and it's probably one of the most expensive decks I have because I play 4 Lotus Petals. So yeah, that can be a big barrier to entry for new players. The deck isn't the best as well, right? Like Mono Green Infect or Simic Infect, those aren't the greatest. And at the same time, it's very easy to play though. You have one goal, you play your lands, you have to time your buff spells right so that you actually deal 10 damage to the opponent with the infect creature and you just kill them. So as far as gameplay goes, I would maybe give it like A to S tier because it's really simple, although it doesn't teach you that much, right? Same with Boggles, but they are still an S tier, so I would give this S tier as far as the gameplay goes. As far as how good the deck is, I don't think it's very good, to be honest. For that, I would give it like C tier. And then the price, well, most of the versions play Lotus Petals, right? You can play it without it, but then I think that if you are building your first deck, you don't want to cut anything. You don't want to cut your cards simply because they are too expensive. I think you want a full deck for Pauper that is super competitive, or you can play with your friends and it's gonna be fun. And you don't want to feel like money is preventing you from having the best version of the deck possible. So if that's the goal here, and we are assuming Infect plays Lotus Petals, because of the price, it could be like a C tier, and I'm not even that mad about it because the deck isn't the best. It's like probably the worst decks here. It's not super consistent, right? It can snag some wins, like it's, yeah, but it's a fun deck, similar to Red Blitz with Kiln Fiend. It's very similar to that. It's very all in. If they have a removal spell at the right time, you just kinda are gone from the game, right? You can't really play. Next up on the list we have Golgari Gardens, and there are many versions of gardens. There are some very fun ones, like the party one with frogs and vampires, we actually made a video on. There is the one with knights, both are from Mvani, right? But the standard one plays the Crypt Rats, probably even the Pactal Terror. I know there have been some nerfs, but I think that is still the best version. It probably plays Black Mage's Rot, and the deck is slow, it's very grindy. It's similar in grindiness to Giant Wildfire and Grixis Affinity. I would say the games go even longer with Golgari Gardens. So because of that, the gameplay isn't maybe the most exciting for new players, but they do learn a lot because with Gardens you need to be patient. So I'm not sure if it means it's a bad thing or a good thing. You know, the gameplay of Gardens can be a little bit, I guess, frustrating for a new player. You wait a lot, you respond to what they do a lot, right? And then if you make a mistake, the game can suddenly end. So I guess there are some problems with the game plan for new players. The price isn't horrible, it's like $40 to $100 again, largely depending on how many snuff outs are you running, right? But again, it can be fun. You know, I don't want to assume that all the players just want to go face and win with Boggles or burn spells. I do assume that some players do like to play the grindier deck, so I'm gonna rank that like it is. Still though, I think there are better decks for starters. Would I recommend it more than Giant Wildfire at a similar price point? I don't think I would. It is like a super difficult deck to play. I don't think so, it's not. You remove your opponent's creatures, you draw a lot of cards with the Wellsprings and Offerings. It's pretty clear, right? Maybe it's because I have a sweet spot for this deck. I think it's quite good and not super hard to play. You sometimes have to make some decisions, but I think this will go at the very bottom of B tier. Yeah, well, in B there's Grixis Affinity, so I actually think I would put it above Grixis Affinity, but below the Earth of Blade and synthesizer decks, the Boro synthesizer decks. I think that's a fair place to put Gardens for new players. Next up we have Mono White Heroic. This deck, the game plan is very similar to Boggles, although you have to make a little bit more decisions and you have to be interacting with the opponent because your creatures don't have the hexproof keyword, which means they can be removed. The deck is very fast, it plays only one color, which means it's very streamlined. You have to make some decisions with the sideboard here and there, but that's not super big. The price is incredible. It costs like $15 to $25 depending on the version, and it actually is kind of powerful. People often find it very surprising when a mono white heroic deck simply beats them to death, and trust me, it can do that. I actually have a video on this deck. It's maybe like a month or two old, but we played this deck for like $15 or $20. It was super fun. It beat most of the decks we played against, and it was just awesome. I had a great time for 15 bucks, and I think most of the players who will pick up this deck for this price will have a great time. So because of that, I will give this deck an S tier. It's similar to Boggles, although it's like half the price, and Boggles are cheap, relatively cheap, right? So this is like half the price. It's awesome. I can't recommend it enough. It's a sweet deck. Next up on the list we have Turbo Fog. So Turbo Fog, I wouldn't even call it like a control deck. It's just a torture deck. Like you you want to mill your opponent, but you're not really milling them. You're just waiting for them to run out of stuff. You're preventing their combat damage. The deck is relatively expensive actually, because it can sometimes run cards like Darkness, because there are a lot of black versions, green, black versions that play Darkness. That card is like $18, so that's pretty crazy. The gameplay, I don't think it's exciting for a new player. Like, there are maybe some people who enjoy this playstyle, but I think most people getting into Magic would just say, I don't want to spend 3 hours just fogging my opponent and then maybe winning, or they manage way to just kill me somehow. I don't even know what's happening with this deck, right? So I will say it's very similar to High Tide, as like it's not super difficult, but it's pretty expensive and it's a torture deck. So I wouldn't really recommend this to new players. It's something maybe you grow into as you continue your Magic career in Pauper, but most of the time this is probably not the best choice for new players. So I would say maybe don't start with Turbo Fog, but if you grow into it, by all means go for it. It can be a cool deck to play for sure. Next up we have Jeskai Ephemerate. This is a difficult deck to play. Let's start off by that. The decision making is insane. I sometimes have trouble with it as well, but my friend, for example, who is relatively new to Pauper, loves to play the deck, and you know, it depends which type of player you are. This deck is like $70 to $120. The sideboard can be very expensive as well. The decision making on this is kinda crazy. You often make one mistake and the game ends, but if you don't, this deck has a lot of potential. It's very, well, I don't know, is it more difficult to play than Spy? I actually think so. So this deck, it's either bottom C or D. Don't get me wrong, the deck is powerful, but you have to make the right decision most of the time, or actually all the time, for the deck to function. So because of that and the relationship with that and new players, I would actually say maybe it's like bottom of the C tier. It's not a torture like Turbo Fog or High Tide. It's not as bad. It's actually fun to play in some cases, and you learn a lot, which is why I will give it C tier. It's somewhere in the middle. It teaches you a ton. The gameplay is not linear. You interact a lot. It's a combo deck in some ways, right? Because you combo the Ephemerate with other creatures, so you need to know that. And when you can do it, that is the hardest part, the timing of the deck, right? So because that and the higher price point, I will give this like a C tier. You can go for it if you are ballsy. You can go for it. And some people who just came into Magic do love Jeskai Ephemerate. I know those people as well. But for most people, for the average MTG player, this is not the correct choice, and it definitely was not the correct choice for me when I started as well. And last on the list we have Dimmer Fairies. This is Dimmer Fairies, but this is just like the control deck that plays the dimmer colors. We can actually say this is like the most of the control decks in the format, right? This is maybe the one which plays like the Modern Age and Spellstutter Sprite and everything. It's pretty expensive. Snuff Out is an expensive card, and a lot of those decks run full playset, which will cost you around $40 by itself, which is like 2 times more than a whole mono white heroic deck, which can be a problem. There are some more expensive cards like Spellstutter Sprite, which is like $4 to $5, and so on and so forth. Brainstorm like $1.5, and Counterspell again. So yeah, the price point is really high. It's not super fun. I think since you play a similar game to something like Gardens, but you're paying much more for the deck. You are not using that many removal spells, but you still have a lot of them. You're countering their spells most of the time. It's just a less fun version of Mono Blue Fairies, I feel like. Also much more expensive. Your mana base isn't as clean because you are splashing 2 colors. The deck is good, especially in the right hands if you make the right decisions. But as a new player, I don't think you would enjoy this deck all that much. Again, there are some exceptions. It's a good chance that if you enjoy decks like Jeskai Ephemerate, you would love the control deck in the dimmer colors as well with the fairies, right? Could be pretty fun. But for most players, again, I don't think so. The gameplay, as far as how strong this deck is, similar to Gardens, but much more expensive, a little bit more decision making. Let's give it a clear C, maybe like more to the top. Sweet, so those are the most relevant decks in the format right now. If I forgot to rank a deck, please let me know in the comments, and most importantly, let me know which deck would you recommend to a new player, because there are a lot of new players watching right now and a lot of new players will probably read the comments. And lastly, let me know how terribly I did in the tier list and how would you have what I have in the D tier, in the S tier, and so on and so forth. So I really hope this was helpful if you are a new player, and I will see you later. Bye.